The exchange of goods and services is not a complicated concept. One group or person does something for another group or person in exchange for a good or another service. Now, this does not mean that the exchange has to be exactly equal. Prices are subjective. It's never a fixed value. I'll explain more about that later. But for now, it's very important to understand that what something is worth is exactly dependent on what someone is willing to pay for it. An issue with this system is that you need goods with you at all times. In fact, currency was created to replace carrying goods to market. In the Eastern Greek kingdom of Lydia, situated in modern-day Turkey, coins were invented to prevent people from having to carry goods such as livestock or grain through the city. The coins were made out of a metal that was abundant in the kingdom, called electrum, which sounds like a spicy stripper name. The coins were then used further to replace the barter system. This didn't happen overnight, and many places still operate on a barter system. Now, if you're wondering what the hell I'm on about, something near and dear to lots of people's hearts, especially the United States government. Debt has always been a thing, but in the years following 1950, things changed drastically. One man went to dinner with business associates and forgot his wallet in his other pants. As we all do from time to time. He was understandably embarrassed and decided that this would never happen again. This individual was named Frank McNamara, and his partner, Ralph Schneider, went back to the restaurant in question with a piece of cardboard and an idea, which then became the Diners Club card, the first modern credit card. Not to say that charge cards or charge it cards didn't exist, but this was the first incarnation of a credit card, even though it was far more similar to a charge card. The difference between the two is that a charge card must be paid in full at the end of each month. The popularity of the card caught the interest of banks and other organizations. The first major success story other than Diners was American Express. American Express started as a competitor to the U.S. Postal Service in 1850, later inventing traveler's checks and a traveler's charge card. In 1858, they introduced their own credit card, and in 1959, they replaced the cardboard and celluloid cards. Then, within 5 years, there were 1 million American Express cards in use at 85,000 vendors, foreign and domestic. Later, major banks got in on the show and started to offer revolving credit, with Bank of America being the first to really open Pandora's box. In 1966, a group of banks in California formed the Interbank Card Association, or ITC, which became none other than MasterCharge. Yeah. This was the United States' first credit card association. MasterCharge began to compete against the local Bank of America card. The BOA decided to go across the country and create the Bank AmeriCard. Very clever. So now we have our major players in place, ready for the brawl of the late 20th century, and it's going to go down in the wallets of every American. Except it wasn't. At first. The pesky government had laws in place that prevented the banks from spreading across the country. In response, the Bank of America and ITC licensed their cards to banks outside of California, creating a sort of symbiotic relationship where the smaller banks would latch on to BOA in hopes of catching some of their success. It got so bad that the government outlawed the drops of unsolicited credit cards in 1970. These cards were also licensed outside of the US. This new industry was exploding, and every bank was trying to capitalize on the public scrounging for cards that would keep them in debt forever. Because their popularity was surging, the US government passed a series of bills to protect consumers and regulate the industry. The Fair Credit Reporting Act of 1970 restricted the collection and use of credit report data. The Unsolicited Credit Card Act of 1970, something I mentioned briefly before, prohibited companies from sending active cards to customers who hadn't requested them. The Fair Credit Billing Act of 1974 amended a previous law that reined in the abusive billing practices and allowed consumers to fight against billing errors. Also in 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed, which disallowed lenders to discriminate against any applicant based on gender, race, marital status, national origin, or religion. Finally, we have the Fair Debt Collection Practices of 1977, which amended the Consumer Credit Protection Act. It forbid predatory debt collection practices and reworked a payee's rights. There have been many more laws passed in many other countries that regulate debit and credit as well. The security of these cards keeps getting better and better, from mag strips to chip cards to RFID, or what many people only know as the tap feature, that you can instantly pay off anything and scares me to my very core. See, with the advance of this technology, it's getting more difficult to predict the future of credit cards. With the advances of things such as Apple wallets and other digital wallets, it's going to be difficult to say what's going to happen in 50 years, let alone 10. All I can tell you is that spending your entire paycheck in a single moment is going to keep getting easier and easier.